Hi folks, Matt Easton here, Scholar Gladiatoria. So this is a fairly restricted and specific video to talk about the word cuirass. We say in English cuirass generally. Originally in French, and it comes from French of course, it would be probably, and I always get criticised by the French viewers for my pronunciation, but it should be pronounced cuirass, I believe. Cuirass. The word cuir, which sounds very like the word queer in English, nothing to do with no relationship between the two words, but cuir, spelled C-U-I-R, means leather. And there is the thing that often gets overlooked. Now, first of all, what is a cuirass? Well, generally speaking, a cuirass is one of these, okay? I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute. But a cuirass is a breastplate and backplate joined together, often with a skirt-like or lower appendage to protect the groin. Okay, breastplates and backplates, unlike in a lot of TV series and films, generally speaking come to the bottom of the rib cage or the real waist. In the modern world, we often think of our waist as where you wear your belt. It is not, that's your hips. The reason that a breastplate and backplate should come to this thinnest part around here is because that's where you bend. Okay, whether you're bending sideways or forwards and backwards, this is your bendy bit. Think about, if you think about a wasp or an insect of any kind really, you've got the thorax and you've got the abdomen, and you've got this little thin bit in the middle which is where they're articulated. That's a bit like us, and that's why when you look at 14th and 15th century armour in art, or the actual armour itself surviving, it's sometimes called wasp-waisted because the breastplate comes in, generally speaking, here under the ribs into the waist, so that you're still able to articulate. And it's very important, in fact, that the breastplate and backplate do come relatively close to the body. If you buy an off-the-shelf armour and it's a bit too big for you, you'll actually find it constricts your movement a lot. If the armour is close-fitting, then it enables you to move more easily because the armour sits closer to the natural points of flex and bend in your body. So the word cuirass, what people often overlook is they think, cuirass, that's one of these, a breastplate and backplate. However, they don't think about the origin of the word, and as I've mentioned in a few of my videos, I did some research into the origin of the coat of plates, which is what comes before the breastplate and backplate in Western Europe. I researched this when I was doing my degree dissertation, and my general opinion, to give you a summary of the conclusion of that dissertation, was that the coat of plates, which is overlapping plates, looks a little bit like lorica segmentata, like a little bit like Roman armour, but equally if you search for the Battle of Visby, spelt Wisby, W-I-S-B-Y, if you search for that battle, you'll find very easily on Google lots of images of the different types of coats of plate that came from that mass grave of that battle in 1361. But the coat of plates, to summarise, in my opinion, kind of developed into two directions. One direction went towards what we call the brigandine, which is essentially the plates got smaller and smaller, and the individual plates got smaller and smaller, but they became much more numerous. So it's a little bit like scale armour, but the plates are on the inside of the fabric. And that gives you great flexibility, but not so great at shock absorption against something like a lance, for example, or even a mace. And in the other direction, it developed into this, the cuirass. So people more or less accept, even if you go back to Claude Blair's original book, European Armour, which is the kind of Bible for studying European armour of the Middle Ages, more or less accept that the coat of plates developed in one direction into the full plate cuirass, as shown on knightly effigies and brasses in artwork, and everybody thinks of the knight in shining armour. So the breastplate and backplate essentially. And in the other direction developed into the brigandine, which was more often used by lighter armed soldiers, although brigandine was also used by knights as well in some situations. However, what gets left behind in that general observation of the probable evolution of plate armour in the 14th century, 13th and 14th century, and going into the 15th, is that the word cuirass means a leather thing. Okay, and so really what I want to say in this video is that people, when you say cuirass, think of this, and they forget that the original word means leather thing. And so essentially, probably what we've got before, or at least in the early stages of the development of the coat of plates, there's actually a more complicated evolution going on, and we get hints of this on certain monumental effigies. So where a knight is dead and they have a tomb built and there's a statue of them lying down, usually with their hands together praying, and they're lying there like they're asleep, obviously they're dead, in stone or alabaster or occasionally other materials on top of the tomb. You can occasionally see at the front and back of the person's body there's a surcoat or a jupon, various types of fabric covering which disguise and cover the coat of plates or the breastplate or whatever they're wearing. However, occasionally at the side there is a slit, and on some effigies you can actually see the meeting of two things, and it's very likely that the original breastplates worn with chainmail armour were leather, or what's sometimes known as cuirass. I hope that my pronunciation is okay. English people will probably read it as cuirass, but in French I believe it's cuirass, and this means boiled leather. It's probably not literally boiled, it's probably actually soaked and then very slowly baked, essentially. But this cuirass produces a very hard plastic-like defence that was obviously, and we can see from the texts, we can see from the inventory accounts of wills and such like in the 14th century and the end of the 13th century, that cuirass defences are starting to be mentioned being used in conjunction with mail armour. So it's very likely in the 13th century, in fact, that as well as the development of the coat of plates, which remember is worn over the mail but under the surcoat, so you can't usually see it in artwork because all you see is the surcoat and then the male arms and legs. What's around the torso you can't normally see. It's very likely that at that time in the 13th century they were trying to augment male armour and essentially protect the torso better, partly from piercing, from lances and arrows, but also from shock, from impact. So when a lance hits you on horseback, whether it pierces you or not, that's a huge amount of impact to take on your body. Then you've got weapons like axes and maces and warhammers coming in, becoming more popular because they're good at compromising male armour. And so you want to protect your rib cage and your lungs, and obviously if you take a heavy strike in your torso, even if it doesn't break bone, it's going to seriously wound you or just knock you down, or might rupture internal organs. So protecting the torso, very, very important, just like with a modern flak jacket. And so it seems that in the 13th century it became very common to augment the male armour with coat of plates and probably with leather defences, certainly on the front and probably front and back. And it seems like there are some hints that actually the earliest form of breast and back plate were probably made of hardened leather, not normal leather. Don't think of a leather jacket, think of cuirass, this boiled leather that gives a plastic type finish essentially. It's quite hard, it's a shell essentially. So a shell front and back, front shell here, back shell here, and connecting at the sides. And these were probably the first cuirasses. Later, of course, the cuirasses of leather were replaced by versions in iron or steel, and that gradually, together with the coat of plates, started to evolve into the plate cuirass that we see openly in artwork in the 15th century. When the fabric covering becomes dispensed with, you can then clearly see in the artwork the breast and back plate with the attached skirt known as a fold. So there we go, really. The term cuirass very clearly originally means a thing of leather. It was to augment male armour and protect the torso better, but over time, in conjunction with the development of the coat of plates, it developed into this. Just very briefly, I will talk. I know I've been requested for a long time on my channel to put my armour on and talk more about armour. I will do, but I'll save that for a future video. Just very quickly, I will show you this. So breast and back plate with the attached fold. You'll notice the fold on this is particularly long, which is in the English style because the English like to fight in foot on foot from about the mid 14th century onwards, debatably even earlier than that actually. So they had a longer skirt than if you look at a comparative German or Italian armour from the same period. They have a shorter fold, less lames essentially at the front. And you'll notice that one side of the cuirass is hinged, that being the left-hand side, because most right-handed people will be hitting you on the left-hand side predominantly. And it essentially opens all the way up on the other side and has two straps at the top. This is worn over a male shirt initially in the 14th century, and then as time goes on they started just wearing an arming doublet underneath with mail only at the gaps, at the armpits and other places. Okay, so there we go. First introduction to the cuirass or cuirass for our French viewers. And just to remind you that the word comes from leather, and the original ones were probably leather defences augmenting chainmail that were then combined with coat of plates defences that developed into the plate cuirass that we famously know from the knight in shining armour images. Cheers guys!
Click subscribe now and also follow us on Facebook.